At some point, safety just is pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything. Yeah. At some point, you're going to take some risk, and it really is a risk-reward question. I said, I think I can do this just as safely by breaking the rules.
It seems like a lot of the way you made this is by taking off-the-shelf parts and sort of MacGyvering them together.
Yeah, pretty much.
Does that not raise anybody's eyebrows in the industry?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The sub was originally known as Cyclops 2, and it began sea trials in 2018 and went on its first Titanic dive in 2021. The hull was made out of 5-inch thick carbon fiber and reinforced with 2 titanium end caps. Oceangate claimed that the Titan could submerge to a maximum depth of 4,000 meters or 13,123 feet.
NASA apparently served as consultants on the hull, which is something their reps have since denied. Stockton said that as long as the pressure vessel was not going to collapse, everything else could fail and the sub would be fine. Stockton advertised this RTM, or real-time hull monitoring system, that was supposed to alert the pilot about any buckling or defect in the sub's hull. It was supposed to use sensors to give real-time updates of the hull's health as it went deeper. And it was advertised that this RTM system would give the pilot advance warning of a hull defect. That way they'd be able to surface the sub safely before anything bad happened. But basically by the time a defect even happens, it's too late anyway. So the system was useless.
It could fit 5 people inside, which obviously is pretty cramped with no room to stand. So people with claustrophobia should probably not apply. Passengers could view the outside via camera feed from monitors inside the sub, which again, I don't see the appeal if you can't even look outside.
So we're coming into the sub. This is the only toilet available on a deep diving submersible. Best seat in the house.
Don't even talk about before.
We put a privacy screen in, turn up the music.
So that's where the window is, at the bathroom.
Very popular.
Yeah.
The only place to look out.
Control screen here, our sonar screen here, and we can put any image we want in the back. We've taken a completely new approach to the sub design, and it's all run with this game controller and these touch screens. So if you want to go forward, you press forward. If you want to go back, you go back, turn left, turn right, go down, go up. And it's Bluetooth, so I can hand it to anybody. And it's meant for a 16-year-old to throw it around, and super durable. We keep a couple of spares on board just in case.
This game controller that we were talking about, the Logitech video game controller, costs something around $30. And the one that they were using is a 10-year-old model. But what's interesting is that the video game controllers are actually used by the U.S. Navy to pilot many of their submarines. For example, they use Xbox controllers to pilot their Virginia-class attack subs and the 377-foot USS Colorado.
We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
There were a lot of rules out there that didn't make engineering sense to me.
The sub was launched in international waters, so it didn't have to abide by the U.S. Coast Guard regulations, including the pesky Passenger Vessel Safety Act of 1993. This was enacted to prohibit dives past 150 feet and provide strict inspection and manufacturing requirements for subs. In an article with the Smithsonian Magazine, Stockton told the interviewer that the law was well-meaning, but he believed it needlessly prioritized passenger safety over commercial innovation. He told the interviewer there hasn't been an injury in the commercial sub industry in over 35 years. It's obscenely safe because they have all these regulations, but it also hasn't innovated or grown because they have all of these regulations. Safety would prove to be an issue and a point of contention for Oceangate and Stockton Rush.
In January of 2018, Oceangate's director of marine operations and submersible pilot, David Lockridge, began to raise some safety concerns. He thought that the sub was dangerous as it was and that big changes needed to be made. He brought up that the 15-inch acrylic window on the sub was only rated for 1,300 meters, even though the company claimed that the sub was rated for more than 4,000 meters. David's lawyers wrote that the paying passengers would not be aware and would not be informed of this experimental design. Just because it's rated at 1,300 meters doesn't necessarily mean it'll automatically break up at depths lower than that. It's just not been rated or guaranteed that it won't break at that depth. And what likely happened was the previous dives to those deeper depths pushed the operational limits of the window, and the pressure created micro cracks that worsened with each dive. And finally, on the recent dive, the window was now too weak to withstand the pressure and broke.
There was also the issue of the carbon fiber hull. David thought that it was too thin and it wasn't undergoing the proper testing. The issue was also the material itself, as carbon fiber isn't built to withstand the compression forces at the deep depths of the ocean. There was also the issue of the mix of materials used to build the sub. In a 2021 interview, Stockton said, "I've broken some rules to make Titan. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did." David also said that he wanted to get Titan certified, but Oceangate declined because of the costs. So he had refused to greenlight manned tests of the early models of the submersible over safety concerns and was fired for this. They sued him for breach of contract revealing confidential information about Titan, and he filed a counterclaim for wrongful termination for being a whistleblower about the sub's lack of safety. 38 experts with the Manned Underwater Vehicles Committee of the Marine Technology Society sent a letter to Stockton in March of 2018. They were concerned about the safety of the sub. They said the company's experimental approach could have minor to catastrophic consequences.
And get this, years ago, David wrote an email to a deep sea exploration specialist and project associate of Oceangate named Robert McCollum with concerns. In the email, he said, quote, "I would consider myself pretty ballsy when it comes to doing things that are dangerous, but the sub is an accident waiting to happen. There's no way on earth you could have paid me to dive that thing."
Rob McCollum also wrote to Stockton in March of 2018, warning him about potential safety issues with the sub. He urged Oceangate not to use the sub until they had it certified, but Stockton wouldn't hear it. He said he was tired of industry players who try to use the safety argument to stop innovation. McCallum said, "I think you are potentially placing yourself and your clients in a dangerous dynamic. In your race to the Titanic, you are mirroring that famous catch cry. She is unsinkable." Stockton replied and said, "We have heard the baseless cries of 'you are going to kill someone' way too often. I take this as a serious personal insult." And so Stockton continued to press on, and he found passengers willing to pay to ride on the sub. Titan completed its first Titanic dive in July of 2021. It had conducted 14 Titanic expeditions in the past, 6 in 2021, 7 in 2022, and there were multiple dives planned for 2023, but as we know, there would only be one.
Titan went on 14 previous Titanic expeditions and things didn't go exactly fine every time, but everyone lived and the sub didn't break. But there were some hard to ignore issues. On a previous Titan expedition, the occupants were stuck in the sub for 27 hours. The sub was on the water's surface, but the water was so choppy that they had to wait to be loaded back onto the mothership. On Titan's first dive to the Titanic, there was an issue with the battery, and the sub had to be manually attached to the lifting platform. There were more battery issues with the sub in 2022. Journalist David Pogue also went on a dive that year, and he said there were multiple issues the sub encountered. For one, the thrusters were installed backwards, making steering an issue. Stockton had to solve this by operating the controller sideways. Not only that, but the sub lost communications with the surface ship for 5 hours. They could still text back and forth, but the surface ship didn't know where the sub was. David described the situation as very tense. He claimed they shut off the ship's Wi-Fi so that nobody on board could tweet about the situation. David said he knew the sub was jerry-rigged, but he went anyway because he was convinced by Stockton's credentials. He'd insisted that the sub was safe, specifically pointing to the carbon fiber hull. And despite all these problems, the expeditions continued. So now let's talk about the most recent expedition.
The first 2023 Titan dive was planned in February, and the passengers were booked by Stockton. Stockton told them that a ride in the sub was safer than a helicopter ride, scuba diving, or even crossing the street.
The crew boarded the Titan, and the Polar Prince launched the sub, and their dive officially began at 12 o'clock p.m. They were supposed to contact the Polar Prince every 15 minutes to make sure everything was going according to plan. They were also able to send short text messages to each other. And for an hour and 45 minutes, it seemed like everything was going smoothly. The sub should have been almost at the Titanic wreckage. The vessel and the Oceangate surface staff last communicated at 1:45 p.m. as scheduled. But then right after that, transponder signal and communications from the sub were lost. Hours rolled by and the vessel was originally supposed to surface again at 7 p.m. But that time came and went, and there was no sign of it anywhere. Hours passed and still there was no sign of the Titan. So at 9:40 p.m., surface staff alerted the authorities about an overdue sub.
So searchers scoured the ocean for the Titan for 80 hours until on June 22nd, an ROV found debris from the Titan near the Titanic wreckage. It was concluded that a catastrophic implosion occurred with no possibility of survival. The 5 victims would have died instantly. There have been some indication that there was a problem, but it would have been very brief, maybe seconds, and death would have been instant and immediate. People have asked if they're going to attempt to recover bodies, and officials wouldn't answer that at the press conference. We're not quite sure. What we do know is that this was the best possible outcome next to them surviving. They probably didn't even have time to comprehend what had happened or what was happening.